There we go. Okay, I want to welcome everybody out to the Roy City Council Special Work Session. This is April 27th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Let me recognize and welcome that we have Council Member Joe Paul, Council Member Randy Scadden, and Council Member Sophie Paul. We appreciate you joining us tonight. We're going to be discussing the proposed Roy City General Plan. So with that, Steve, we'll turn it over to you and let's go ahead and begin.
Just so everybody knows, we're starting on page 36, kind of where we left off from the last work session. Before we proceed, I wanted to kind of give some background. I don't know if all of you have heard this or seen this or stuff, so just kind of a background of a number of meetings that have already taken place on this and how we've proceeded. So back in 2017, December, I think Mayor was probably the only one. No, you were around, Joe? Okay. So two of you were around. 2017 when we adopted the Focus Roy, and one of the first recommendations it had was to update the general plan. So shortly thereafter, staff applied with Wasatch Front Regional Council. In February and April, we were awarded the grant. In total was 130. That number's gone up a bit because we ran out of money. The WFRC gave another $10,000 to help the consultant to finalize a few things. But that also included the mixed use code. So kind of, I don't want to go through everything, but basically in 2018, November is when we started to have our first meeting about the general plan with the landmark design team. So since November 18, there have been, and I'll just kind of let you kind of look. We started off with a joint council planning commission meeting. Then we had held an advisory committee that had 2 city council, 3 planning commission, and some staff members. We had online or visual surveys. We actually did visual surveys twice at civic classes at high school. On March 6th, they talked to 5 local business owners as well. At the bottom, you'll notice this is something that I've never seen before, but they kind of went out and did it. They did living room discussions where they contacted a family, had them invite family and friends that are Roy to come to someone's house and had a discussion of the, how Roy should look and stuff like that. They actually did it twice. My big of fame is I was in Roy Days at a booth. I don't know if anybody remembers walking by. I had a public notice sign right out front saying, come talk. Kevin remembers. So we were there for 2 days getting people's comments and responses. The visual survey that we put out had 285 responses. Again, just end of October, kind of the unofficial draft that we gave out to many of the departments to review and provide some comments. The first official draft was May of 26th of 2020. But as everybody knows, what happened around that time, COVID hit. So things kind of died down and went dormant, but it wasn't that the planning commission wasn't eager to get things going. So they had us put it online to have the survey, have the document to get people's comments. There were several times that we put it in the magazine, asking people to review that. I know Diane had at least once or twice commented in her corner or the council's corner. I think there was 3 or 4 times that we put it in there, just advertising for people to go online, look at the document, provide comments. So in the middle there, it was online for 14 months. Not that the planning commission didn't want to, I mean, every meeting was like, can we go out? Can we get a public meeting? It's like, well, COVID's still killing us. So as soon as COVID kind of lifted, they did have 2 public open houses in the summer of 2021, and then held a public hearing on December 14th. The sad part of only 3 people showed up to that public hearing, made comments. Two of them are in this room right now. All the comments were, they support the document. There are a few little things in reference to some that, they like little changes or reorganization or so, but for most part, we had nothing but good comments in the public hearing. So just in general, from the first meeting in 18 to the last meeting in 21, there was over 31 events, meetings, or gatherings within that. And that hasn't included what this body is going through. So today makes the third work session. So just so you know, I mean, it's a long drawn out, especially for Sophie and Randy, who haven't been around as long as the rest of us. Just kind of give you an idea of kind of how long this has been going on. I don't think we'd still be here if COVID hadn't hit. I think it would have been done before you guys started, but just kind of wanted to give some background. So we got through the first 34 pages. There was no comments on page 35 because it's blank. So we'll start on page 36. Since then, from our last meeting, the mayor has withdrawn a few of his concerns. And then Councilmember Wilson kind of clarified some of hers. So that was in the document that we received in the last packet. Just a reminder, kind of the legend of what color everybody's comments are that are in there. So as you go through, you kind of know who it is, but I'll kind of direct the person when we come to that page. So finally, so page 36, Diane, let you lead the discussion.
All right.
On this page.
So basically, this is talking about the neighborhood program. And if you kind of turn the page over on the latest packet that Steve sent out, what I've done is I have outlined the personal comments I had, because in 2020, when we thought there was going to be a big push, there were several people that I had asked to read it, that did read it, that talked to me kind of probably in response to some of those comments we made in the city. So there's some citizen comments on top. And then if you look, there are also two cities that I spoke with personally who have had neighborhood programs. Now Provo still has a neighborhood program, and Karen Tapahay who is the person who's over that. And so I've kind of combined those comments, but the biggest concern, so all of those concerns are there, but the biggest concerns with the neighborhood program is she said that they went from 15 to 30 different neighborhoods. They've had to hire additional staff for them. And the only way to even kind of get it to work is to hire additional staff to keep these neighborhood programs going. And even at that, it's a real challenge. There are certain neighborhoods that will kind of rise to the occasion, but most of the time, eventually they'll fizzle. They've had theirs going on and off for quite some time. They are in the process now of cutting it down to 5 to 6 neighborhood divisions max. More is just too much. And the full-time staff member getting in touch with the areas, the residents, and they said that the names of the neighborhoods was a pretty big deal for them. The neighborhood, I just didn't get the neighborhood branding was ever really much of a thing. Sometimes there are grants that some of the neighborhood people can do, but then that takes a whole nother staff person. One of the biggest concerns was that when you do get active people in this neighborhood thing, then they get excited about it, and then they want to take on more power than they really truly have. And so then you're kind of backing it from that. One of the most beneficial things she's found is that they can get someone right now. They used to kind of have people that would come and vote, and she goes to all of these little neighborhood meetings. Now they're almost just having to get anybody they can possibly talk into volunteer for it. But communication has been the most helpful thing for them. That's been the most beneficial, is if they can get someone that is a leader of each of these neighborhoods, then they can use that person to disseminate information throughout that. Otherwise, there have been a lot of challenges. In Ogden City, they have things divided, but they really only use it in office. And like if they're going to be redoing a general plan, or if they're going to be doing different staff stuff, they'll use it just to talk about, well, this area that they've labeled this name, but it hasn't been very helpful in regards to citizens and neighborhood identity has not been helpful at all for them. In fact, what they found has been a lot better for them is they have a target project, and then they will go out and they'll say, okay, so many feet around this project, we're going to get and try to recruit people to help us, to give us information, feedback. And the actual division of neighborhoods hasn't been very helpful for them. And a lot of times, both of these places found that organizing the neighborhood and leadership became the project. It took so much work and effort to organize the neighborhood that by the time, but yeah, and then everything else kind of fizzled at that point in time. So it became the project.
So Dan, what's the solution?
So I believe that the solution is either to not even have a neighborhood division, which would make it easy. If we feel that communication.
That's my vote.
Yeah, done.
I make a
Hold on,
motion, we
hold
get
on.
rid of it.
Yeah.
The neighborhoods weren't to have community neighborhood meet or quorums or whatever you want to call them. It was all for identification.
Mhm.
So in Ogden, the unfortunate part is having worked in Ogden for 5 years and having written 4 of the community general plans, it was all for identification. You live in, well, Randy, you live in where?
Right. I live in Herefordshire in
You
Roy.
live in Roy.
Right.
Malvern, Landahani,
I mean,
all the
Yeah.
different.
Have you really said you're not from Roy?
No.
You're just identifying exact
Correct.
area, neighborhood, or what have you. So that's all this has done is said, okay, we're gonna divide it up, 5, 6 neighborhoods. 3 or 4 of them are historic in nature on names.
Sure.
A couple of them were just made up just by,
Just drawing a name out of a hat or whatever.
If the purpose of it is what it talks about right here is neighborhood cleanups, I brought this up 3 years ago or something. There are community groups in our community. There's scout troops, there's different churches and that. If, there was talk about, okay, somebody goes and complains about their neighbor's yard as a trash hole. Instead of going out and ratting them out on social media, how about we have a list of people that it's not sponsored by the city, but there is one church that has their own sign up thing. But if we just have a list of different organizations that if somebody needs help or a neighborhood needs cleaning up, you can say, here are the different organizations that do stuff in Roy, scout troops, churches, Boys and Girls Club,
Right.
well, and that
And
kind
then-
of into the.
we just send them to them and let them.
Right.
The
But I think what
citizens-
Diana's talking about is because we have within it said, okay, this is this neighborhood, and this, it's not to subdivide the city. It's not to say you're not of Roy or even to organize neighborhoods. I mean, when you go through the document later, when you have the maps, it's saying, okay, within this geographic area, there's kind of a small area plan for that neighborhood. And that's what Ogden has done. The Horseman or the Hillcrest Bonneville neighborhoods, they're just looking at it within that and they say, okay, this is where residential should be, this is where
Sure.
commercial should be, but it's
And again,
for
yeah.
identification.
And remember the general
Totally
plan,
going off
yeah. And remember, the general plan is not a thou shalt name thy neighborhood, whatever we call out in the general plan. It would still be up to effectively the citizens, I would say, or the
Everybody
constituency.
we asked never had a comment about those.
What they
neighborhood
wanted.
Well, and on the flip side of it, in a city that's 7.5 square miles, comparing it to nothing personal, but comparing it to Ogden or Mill
Provo
Creek or Salt Lake or
right.
any of them, where they have districts and they're represented by, elected officials and stuff like, I could see that, but in a town this small,
But even Ogden's 14 neighborhoods aren't districts as for voting, aren't districts for anything other than in their general plan, they divide the city up into 14 communities. That's all this is.
Let me ask the question, council. In reference to page 36, what do you want to do with page 36?
Well, this would, the comment takes 36 and
All the way
then
through
all the neighborhood
Exactly.
maps and stuff as well. So I mean, we see, 30 to 40 pages of elimination.
We want to do a 36 and we'll walk through what you decide on 36 will determine what we do pretty much through the rest of the document where there's this neighborhood concept.
I think that if you're using it as identification only, that's a different thing. But a lot of the push in this document talks about trying to get a program or getting logos or getting an identity. And I believe that is not really, it hasn't been really successful in the places that I've read about. I think it takes dollars from the city that shouldn't be spent on block parties and coming up with designs and flags and all that sort of thing. So, you know, and to have it for communication, maybe, but I just think that this focus for those first few pages, when I was talking about all this extracurricular, I don't think it's beneficial. I don't think it's gonna work. And if we want to use it only for, you know, Steve to have on the map to say, okay, we're
I
talking
agree
about
with you.
this area.
Let's strike it.
So the only one comment I would say coming out of this, there are some meat and potatoes in this, but I almost think it's based off of ordinance or, you know, what the zoning is. Instead of turning into neighborhood, how we're gonna run the neighborhood and bump elbows and sing kumbaya, why don't we turn it into, this is what we want for the different zonings in, you know, in this zone, this is the look and feel of what it should be like.
Right.
Because then it mirrors your building lots and your streets and all that in zoning.
So is there a way that we can?
Don't. Zoning itself is a completely different animal.
Sure.
Has nothing to do with this book. This is really, I mean, the neighborhoods.
I get it, but if you look at what we did in chapter 13, it talks a lot about what streets look like, what sidewalks look like, what
That was taken out.
there's.
It's in other parts of our ordinance. We left the
You know,
landscaping
it's in the
ordinance.
Master land use map, or
Right.
transportation, I mean,
Yeah,
the chapter that had dealt with streets itself was thrown out 100%.
I remember that, but I thought there was still stuff in there that talks
It talks
about
about having, you know,
walkable
connection.
sidewalks
You've
and
got the
connections and all that stuff.
landscaping, because we still had, remember the two options? We have the two optional landscaping project.
But to me, eliminating the neighborhood, basically just.
Well, here,
taking most of
let
the
me.
Document out.
Let me say half of page 53 to, where does it stop the neighborhood? To 69 strike,
Yeah,
53 and a half to 69 strike.
Well, just so you know, it's not gonna be just that.
Okay,
Because there are other mentions of those neighborhoods throughout the whole document that will take time to research and amend out and take out, you know, amend paragraphs, pages. Because
okay, then keep it.
It's not just a simple tear these pages out. It's
We cross-reference later on, is that what you're saying?
like last night in the planning commission, we're talking about water-wise drought tolerant landscaping, and it's not just one section.
Sure,
It's actually 13 different sections of the code we have to go through.
gotcha. Okay,
This is gonna be that-
with that understanding, that's a little bit different.
but I think that it can be done. We can go through that. We can go through the paragraphs and we can get that cross-reference.
I guess my other question is we've kind of, you know, there's 9 individuals on the planning commission who like this. There's 3 individuals who talked about it in the public hearing who like this. The neighbors, the citizens that came out and talked about it. I'm not sure why all of a sudden those voices are.
So did they talk to people who've actually tried to do this and how it's worked? Because
Well,
the
one,
ones-
they talked to me because I have done it and but you also got to remember, Karen is not a planner nor in the planning department.
no, she's just talking about how that
Right.
works in their city in
And
fact,
we're
several
not
other cities
going that route.
have had to, well, if you talk about the way it talks about on like page 39, it does talk about going that route. It talks about getting involved people and making sure you've got people who are establishing friendships. And we're talking about getting people who will be reliable and dependable.
If that's, then it, you know, get rid of block parties, porch light, trees.
Yeah, I was about ready to say, on each one of these neighborhoods, take out the program enhancements. The physical features, if we want to redevelop the downtown area, or separate bike lanes or shared bike routes and traffic calming, that's a great conversation that we have in this city. Or bioretention cells. That stuff's probably all stuff that you can leave in here, but when we talk about neighborhood branding, cleanup, forestry, watch, porch lights, block parties,
Yeah,
that's a lot
To
of,
me, that's easier to remove because it is just a paragraph. It's just a section of the code.
I would get rid of the
One
enhancements.
thing I just wanted, like porch light program. Again, it's just a concept, so conceptually it makes sense.
But if we want a porch light program and somebody wants to champion it, they can bring it forward and we can develop something at that time.
So the question I have on the porch light program, just again, throwing it out. Did we just approve for a street light in one street? It was dark. How much,
It's like three.
how much do you think it costs?
It's like $4 grand, 3,500,
Okay, so
4,000.
Brandon said in between $300 to $5,700 for that one street light. At $6 a bulb, an LED bulb, we can buy 500 to 950 and light up more of the city than one street light.
So do it as an initiative and put it in the monthly newspaper and tell everybody to light their
This
porch
is
light.
just a concept plan. It's nothing that says it must be done, it has to be done, and we're putting money to it. Because if you guys, when you're doing budgets, say, you know, we don't have the budget to do that, then it doesn't happen. If all of a sudden someone says, you know, I'd like to champion that, are you gonna say no?
So here's the
But
question.
it's not going to limit it.
No, we're not even past 36 yet. 36, I think what Steve is suggesting is it's interwoven through a lot of pages. You mentioned,
Right.
Randy, from 35 or some odd to 63.
Yeah, to
How
69.
about, Steve, would you be okay if we kind of just hold on this one? Let's see what they do in terms of whether or not the concept of the neighborhood has value. If it does, then page 36 can almost retain intact. And there may be components within the page that maybe they like to clarify. But we're not getting past 36, and we're already jumping into porch lights and those. So may I suggest we hold on 36, put a little fold on it. Let's see what you come up with when we get past the neighborhood component. If there's things that are still left in there, then I think, Steve, 36 can stay intact as it is. But if you take everything out that deals with neighborhoods, then 36 has no value, therefore just remove page 36.
Well, I think why we jump forward is because it's all chapter 3, implementing and vision.
Gets across the whole thing.
It's a whole thing,
Yeah.
but
Like I say, I'm okay with calling out neighborhoods and maybe what future we want it to look like, but when we get into the enhancements,
okay,
Mhm.
I'll just jump to the enhancements. Steve?
what's on every one of these pages that's a neighborhood?
Well, you got, just prior to this one, you got the neighborhood cleanup. That's on page 37. What do you want to do there?
Turn it over to the volunteer effort.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
fine.
What do you want to do with this information?
I think that page could be removed.
You
This
got a
is just
motion
a
to
concept.
basically remove page
Because
37.
I think it can be done in a different way, and I don't know that it should be part of this. That's when it starts taking the whole neighborhood division and it starts morphing into a different animal.
But isn't the whole purpose of this is just a plan? I mean, it's not like these things are all gonna be implemented and done.
Again, it's
just
not
the
a thou
concept
shalt.
of Doing
It's
it,
just-
but
I mean, but then why is it there if, I mean, I understand it's the 30,000, 50,000 look, but on the other hand, it'd be nice to have it be realistic.
What would you like to do with page 37, neighborhood cleanup? Do you want to leave it in the plan or take it out?
It just gives guidelines. Again, it's guidelines in terms of what the expectation is for a project for a neighborhood.
Put this, make a detailed event plan and find enthusiastic leaders, recruit volunteers early, get supplies donated. Ooh,
It's like a checklist.
I just think that doesn't need to be in a
Comcast
general
day of
plan.
service every day of the week is what we got going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it can be done in the city, but just not as part of a general plan. It can be done, like Joe said, there are volunteers that are ready and
I
willing.
mean, if we want to organize a neighborhood cleanup program, I think we can do that independent of having guidelines in this book that tell us how to do it.
So at this moment, we got two of you basically are saying, let's take it out. Is there a third?
take out what?
That
The-
page,
Page 37.
36 and 37, or just
Just
37?
Just 37.
just 30, it's just talking about neighborhood cleanup.
I would go into remove it because how many people, when they have the Comcast day of what carrying or whatever, go to our general plan and say, oh, I get that now.
No, we have leaders in the city. We have department heads, Public Works and Parks and Rec that identify things throughout the year that, hey, we're gonna put this on a list that next time there's an opportunity to rah together and clean up the city, that's where we'll start.
Okay, Steve, I think I heard three of them indicate, let's take out page 37. Let's go to page 38.
I recommend that page 38 is also removed. I don't believe that we need to have the city organizing an urban forestry program. I think there are other resources that we can do it. We already have guidelines in other, regulations and ordinances. And again, it fits in that same situation. And I just don't think that that needs to be there.
Anybody agree to that?
I agree.
Okay,
Amen.
Sophie agrees. Anybody else agree?
So
Randy?
scratched.
Okay, Steve, we got 3 to agree. Take out page 38.
Okay, Steve, I'll go with you. There's probably benefits to a porch light program. And you know what? I've seen neighborhood watch programs work, but I'm not gonna put somebody in a retired cop car that says neighborhood king on it.
Does the city run neighborhood block watch?
No.
No,
Then
No. My
If
daughter's
there's
neighborhood,
just
they do their
something
own.
that says you can have a neighborhood watch if you want to organize it, don't call us when it backfires on you.
that's what the other two pages did.
It's okay to put that in there. I'd scratch the block party program.
Yes.
Yeah,
You
my
know,
daughter, they have a
You
neighborhood.
know, we already
watch.
spend money on that.
Got signs out there.
We got
Where's that
permits
fit
that
in
are
the budget?
required for it to close it, so every department has to approve it. Then Public Works has to go out there and close the street with block, barriers, and then they gotta come back and pick it up. So the city is already spending money on a block party.
Well, they're facilitating it, but it's not been done underneath this neighborhood thing. And
And
it's not the
just a-
city promoting.
it's a
Okay,
concept.
where is that in our, what you just talked about? I remember it just coming across the dais to talk about it. Where's it written?
It's in the ordinance that basically says if the city, you get so many signatures.
Yeah, that's right.
that they
Okay, there you go.
pay a
It's
fee to
already
have the
organized.
Police come in and the public works to
And this
block
is
off
just
the
a
street.
concept. But if you want it removed, we will remove it.
Okay, I'm sensing from the conversation, council, porch light program seems to be okay.
Okay.
Neighborhood watch is okay.
And waiver will watch, but block parties, there seems to be some reluctance.
Yeah.
How do you feel about block parties left in here or taken out?
I like to attend them, but I don't want to fund them out of
Did
city
you want,
coffers.
did I hear you say take it out?
Yep.
Out
Okay,
for me.
Steve, I think we got 3 that said they'd like to see the block parties taken out. Leave the other 2 in. Perfect. I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Page 40, I mean, I don't see a problem talking about physical enhancements. There's nothing that says we're gonna do it. Maybe a developer comes in and redevelops a neighborhood. At that point, we'll say, hey, this is what we want right here. Put it in your plan.
Because, Diane was involved with not necessarily with UDOT, but a developer that was asked, you gotta get UDOT's approval. And UDOT gave him 3 options, and guess what one of them was? To put a median in 3,500 west, 4,800 south to about 5,200 south. So UDOT is already pressing the issue of median, so.
Well, no, that's what I say. I don't have a problem leaving the physical enhancements. There's nothing in here that, as Randy and I often say, thou shalt.
Mhm.
It's a good guideline if we want to do it. If we want, downtown district, if,
The great thing about leaving it in is when UDOT comes to me and says, do you guys have any plans or any ideas of what you want in there? We can give them this. If we don't, it's gonna be 100%.
yeah, that's why I say, I don't have a
concrete.
problem. I'm already up to page 48. Let's keep going.
Yeah,
Well,
likewise.
50,
You okay with the
51,
street systems?
Nothing, yeah, there's no
Everybody okay
concerns
with that?
there. Yeah.
52. Do I hear
I think we're
53?
okay, Steve. enhance
So I got
page
a
40.
question in regards to the street medians. I would say that over 70% of the people that talked to me were they don't want street medians. In fact, even at that meeting, the developer said, well, we don't want to get all the neighborhood, upset at us for putting a street median in. And so I believe that goes along. So if we are going to tell UDOT that our citizens really don't want medians, I mean, how is that in this document that says, okay, we understand that's an option, but our citizens really do not prefer that option. They are not very happy about that.
Are we in a position to
But
dictate that?
Luckily,
to UDOT.
UDOT gave him an option of which of
Right.
these 3 do you want? There's one, it used to be the Firestone building,
Mhm.
whatever credit unions.
Back you.
That one is, he's got 2 options. Either move your building to where you want it, or we're putting in a median right
Right.
there.
So the idea though is,
But it's,
shouldn't the general plan be saying, guiding us that most of our citizens prefer no medians if at all
well,
possible?
this is guiding UDOT more than our citizens.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not
Make-
saying it's
make
guiding
sure
the
you- Make sure you
citizens.
understand what he just said. What he just said was, when you approve this long-term plan,
Mhm.
Diane, it becomes the foundation for future requirements. What Steve can do, if you approve it, is that he can then start looking and talking to people about implementing your general plan, approved plan of what you vision. If it's in there, he has the authority to talk to people about looking at that possibility.
But he doesn't have the authority to move forward until a plan's developed and it's voted on.
Correct.
But if UDOT says we're putting in median, I can say, well, our general plan asks you to consider and look at landscaping it and doing other stuff rather than just.
I mean, I agree with Diane that most residents don't want medians, but I also say public safety. Medians make sense, right in, right out only streets. Because I live by one of those and it's one of the most accident prone
If I don't have a
intersections.
plan,
Right.
UDOT's just gonna look at me and say, well, you have no talk in this discussion.
And all I'm hearing is UDOT, right? The likelihood of a median on any of Roy City-owned streets is like
We have
probably not.
jurisdiction of our own roads, so
Right.
when you get into the neighborhoods, they don't show up. Now, the only one is like bulb outs and stuff like that. We gotta be careful because the EPA has required cities, as we improve streets, to look at biotene type park strips. So your park strips are gonna go from 4.5 feet to probably 6 to 8 feet in order for the stormwater to go through that, to filter it out, to be able to put cleaner water into the storm drains. So that one, again, you can remove it, but it's gonna be a requirement that as we improve our own streets to start implementing those programs.
The retention is required, but it doesn't have to be done that exact way, right? For a bulb out, because the bulb out takes out a big section of parking.
Yeah.
And right now, that's a pretty high price commodity around here. We don't have a lot of parking. And so why even promote that as an option when we know we still need to have the water retention
You hit the nail on
problem?
the head. It's the option. It is the option of that. It's not again, it's not a thou shalt. It is
Right.
an option.
I understand, Randy, but please understand, understand the purpose of the general plan. By approving the general plan, you are allowing at least the conversation to take place. If UDOT comes into the city and says the general plan supports our idea about putting those in under UDOT control,
Sure.
then Steve has the authority, because the general plan was approved, that simply says, yes, the city council and the city can go ahead and move towards that. But if it's something that's different to what is UDOT says, I want to put a medium, I want to put trees on there. If you have shown no interest to wanting that to happen, then UDOT has to come back to the city and have a conversation with it. And just because they own their own does not necessarily mean that they have authority to do everything in there. So all I'm saying to you would be is, this is a guide. You like what you see, you think UDOT or you or anybody else in the future might want it, you leave it in. If you think there is risk and you'd rather have the conversation at the time, go to the council to decide that, then I say, don't put it in here. But to me, if I seen it in the general plan, Randy, I'm telling you, you've given me authority to go ahead and move forward.
Sure.
You've said it's okay. So here's an example.
Now, kind of go along with Diane, the neighborhood type roads, yeah, you guys are in control of those streets.
All of them.
So if you want to take out the neighborhood connector or the neighborhood greenway, I'm fine, but just realize that Ross and I would have to have those conversations about doing stuff similar to what's in here. Because the best option may have a median in the middle of the road to filter it, or it might be a bulb out or widening the park strip. So regardless if you keep this in or not, I'm already gonna have those conversations. In some of the neighborhoods where we're redoing streets, those conversations are already happening. So,
Okay.
and these are just guides, it's not a thou shalt.
Right.
So if you guys,
to
me, the neighborhood ones are a little easier to remove
Yeah.
than the bigger street ones that I don't have control over, 19 or 35 or
Right. All the UDOT.
56.
Right.
Well, I do think that the bulb outs, there are too many disadvantages. You know, it obstructs traffic many times. It obstructs the parking. Bike lanes, there's problems with the bike lanes oftentimes with those. And I just assume that they go out of their way to come up with a different solution for that bioretention. And And if it really comes down to that, then talk to us, but not have it in here like we kind of are okay with it. That's my feeling.
Fine with it.
What do you want to do, Council? We're on page, we were on page 41.
We're on
Steve.
44, because
We're
the other
45.
roads were more of UDOT.
You don't,
Yeah, so I've jumped ahead to 44 and 45.
so, okay, so what do you want to do about 44 and 45, Council?
Again, those are more neighborhood type roads.
Right.
I propose we remove medians out of the neighborhood connector and bulb outs out of those roads.
We control those roads. It's never gonna happen.
You can't say that.
Right, when it's in here, then that means it's right.
Now, you'll have some influence on it.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that you've established the future. Now
I
the city
will
can
go
at least
with
proceed.
Diane. Things in the middle of the street really make people in this city happy, so get rid of it.
So
So remove 44 and 45.
I think so.
you agree? I need one more, right? Diane, you okay?
Diane, Sophie, and Joe. That's the
Okay,
three.
so we got three. So on page 44 and 43, we'll remove those
Please.
Those,
I pretty much already have one.
red lines, circle areas. You okay?
Yeah.
Remember what you were looking for now?
Yes, thank you. Mhm.
Okay. I'm sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
Good. Remember which button to push to go in the right direction. Okay, page 46.
For me, the main thing here is we've already talked about the medians and stuff and the snowplow problems and all that, but it comes down on the right middle side where it says street connectivity. It talks about the catwalks, the making small links through properties. And I think we just went through a whole session of that, and I'm not gonna say it couldn't ever be done, but if we're trying to promote it here, why would we try to promote it here when it causes so much angst and it increases work and maintenance and cost and make them work for it to actually have it be valid as opposed to us trying to push it. I just think that the references to catwalk should be removed.
I don't need.
I agree, because we just went through getting rid of most of them.
No, we
No.
got rid of two.
We got rid of two.
One was already closed and one's made of dirt.
Yeah.
The rest of them, you had a large outcry to keep them.
So in that situation,
Large
this doesn't mean we couldn't put it in.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. If a
But this-
development comes in and it
Yeah.
makes sense to put one in the developer, or we decide that we
Right.
want
I'm
one.
asked, why do I need to put it in? I no longer have somewhere to look to say, this is why.
Sure, you can talk to us at that point in time, or you can talk to the other people, but we
But
still
most-
had them
most
without it being in our general plan. We had them.
Subdivisions don't necessarily come to you.
Okay, well, that's all right too. I think that can be done something on the side or separate as opposed to making it as a kind of a uniform approach. Because that exception can be made better than doing it in reverse.
So if I understand your comment, Diane, and it appears you have three individuals and also agreeing to it. That highlighted line, you would like those small
I think
link
it's the whole
comments
section.
being removed?
Right,
The
Council?
whole section.
No, I
whole
would think
paragraph,
just that
or the
line.
I think the lines, I think the rest of it, I mean, we can certainly go into it. There are certainly other problems with it, but I think the most fundamental part is where it talks about the catwalks, the small links through the properties.
So we okay? One, anybody else agree with removing that?
Doesn't that lower left blurb and picture, isn't that in our transportation plan?
Well, I mean, most pictures are just conceptual, so.
No, but when we talk about traffic calming,
I'll tell you, we could take that out too, but
isn't, there's nothing calming about it, but isn't that in our transportation plan?
right, we already have that.
Traffic
Isn't
available.
the transportation plan an addendum to this?
Yes.
Well, this is supporting the other document that already exists. Or once this is approved, the transportation plan will support this.
Okay, let me ask this question.
So I mean, I can take out catwalks if you guys are.
Just scratch the catwalks.
Okay, I got three.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay, so Steve, if you can just take that highlighted area out, I think we're there. Okay. council?
And
Go
then
ahead.
that will go forward into some of the other
Yes.
maps, but,
Yeah, you'll see. 'em.
right.
Because
Mhm.
that would have done that.
Okay, I would really like to take showers out of this
Agreed.
page.
Yeah, I think we could do that.
Let me have you bike to work before.
You have a shower down here, you're fine. You have one, but yes.
But
But I don't think the city
okay
needs
with
to
that?
provide that.
I talked to
I
a buddy
think
of mine
somebody else
that,
can
yeah,
provide that.
I do
talked
like
to-
the
yeah.
idea, but I don't want to have to pay
Hmm.
for that service.
Pay for
Yeah,
it.
let the companies, I mean, we have them in our work. People that bike to work, they have means to
Yeah.
take care of business, shower, shave.
We already have enough of a vandalism problem with our current bathrooms. I don't
Bathrooms,
even
I
want to
know.
know what doing showers would,
I guess we could have
introduce.
towels and
We'll just leave
stuff for them too, but
right?
You definitely should public and decent.
Exactly.
We're on page 49. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, it's, most of these are yours, Mayor.
Actually, the only comment, council I had, it was in reference to the park strip. I think Steve made an interesting comment. It could very well be that the idea about may have to use more of the park strip if they're going to be able to use those retention ponds. Therefore, if that be the case, the typical 5 feet, Steve, if I understand your comment, may not be adequate enough if we're forced by policy to move to a much wider one. The interesting trade-off, Sophie, would be is we're going to have to probably move those sidewalks more into the private property or move,
The sidewalk wouldn't move, it would be,
go out to the street.
Yeah.
Okay.
the street would decrease in
Yeah,
size.
that would be the preferred way. So I think
Not buying
on
people's land.
my comment about flip your strip was only comment suggesting is widening creates more of a challenge. But in light of some things Steve's aware of, it may be appropriate just to leave it in there as the technology shifts. He did make a couple of comments and it was just more or less your thoughts. Vegetative garden, green roofs, okay, we've seen those back east. They seem to be really popular. Do you see that's something you have an interest in? And this previous, state that better for me. It's paving, previous paving. Never heard of that before. The first time I've seen it, but I've read a lot about it. It's some interesting thing. And I guess, Steve, my only comment was, is that does our climate, in light of the cooling and thawing, is it allow those kinds of capabilities to be okay?
That's a great question, and I'd refer to Ross or others that deal with it, but I don't think it would be our streets that would do it. I think it would be like if we, to me, if the technology was good, the DNRG trail would be a perfect item instead of just blacktop that is impervious, make it something that still captures the water and sends it through.
Insensitive.
But again, if it's not good for our climate, our climate doesn't help it, it's not gonna happen. But again, this is just a concept. Nothing's changing if we
Nothing
remove
changes,
it or keep it. Same with the green roofs, they exist
They do.
in the state.
It's an
The
idea.
building code just requires certain things.
Because they may come with a plan that Steve will have to look at and says, yeah, we can put some, those kind of capabilities
I
in our.
know the development in between the railroad tracks and stuff is looking at flat roofs to have rooftop gardens and
Okay.
places to sit.
Then
Like,
unless,
Maybe like if we build a hotel and they wanted something up there like that.
But again, this is not dictating they can or can't, it's just, again, a concept.
in light of the conversation, I'd like to withdraw any comments on that unless council, you see anything that I've said here as being something you'd like to further explore. Otherwise, I'd recommend leaving it in.
I think you should. leave it
Agreed.
in.
Okay.
Leave it in.
Okay, we got 3. I think we're good. Anything else on this? Diane, you had some things,
I think this is still just referring to the same comments.
same areas?
Mhm.
Okay, so let's leave everything on page 49 in. Go ahead, Steve.
The next page is 53. And now you're getting into the neighborhood.
So the neighborhoods would have to apply to, again, these are just suggested names. These aren't like what we're saying they're going to be. So the neighborhood could come to
Well, I
us.
mean,
and
if you adopted, this is what the names are unless
They come
the
in and say
neighborhood
otherwise.
says, we want to change it.
Okay.
Unless you guys can think of different ideas and different names. Again, Meadow Creek, Kingsville, and Midland were the ones that were kind of made up. Eagle Gate, which is the golf course, I mean, it's a pretty prominent thing in that neighborhood. Sand Ridge, Cozy Dell, there is a a subdivision called Cozydale. Arsenal Villa, the fun part is that, you know, the reference to Hill Air Force Base, and then Pioneer is really the neighborhood that started the first neighborhood of Roy. So you've got references to historic stuff on some and some on not on the other. You want to change the names, great. Again, to me, it's the concept really is, you know, for Sand Ridge, if the neighborhood says, you know, we want this or this, we could amend this map rather than everything else, very similar to what Ogden's done.
Diane, you have some thoughts on this? Now we're really in the nuts and bolts of this idea about labeling neighborhoods. They've given us obviously what appears to be 8 different types of names. First, I guess you asked the question, you okay with the idea about looking at some type of labels in these particular neighborhoods? If you're okay with that, I think there's an argument to leave it as it is, and then we can kind of focus the names. But if you have an objection to even having these kind of labels within the neighborhood, then now's the time to bring it, because it will roll literally from the very first page we looked at all the way rest through the book. So what would you like to do about labeling neighborhoods?
I believe, go ahead, Ann.
I say, I know, I grew up across Roy Park and we were called the Barrett subdivision. Is that still called that?
The subdivision is probably the same name, but just when you all of a sudden have 20 different
So
subdivisions.
you're not talking subdivision, you're
No.
talking.
This is generally the borders are really large item, you know. 4800 South is a large road. The railroad is a large divider. 5600 South is a large divider. 3500 West. So it's not just this, I mean, a neighborhood on the west side of 35 and the east side really aren't interconnected because the road is so big. Same with the railroad. You don't really have, you know, you might have friends across it, but the neighborhoods really aren't interconnected because it is a large dividing thing. And that's why the lines are where they are. The only one is, I'd probably say you could change is Kingsville and Pioneer.
How much do we reference the actual names of the remainder of the document from?
Other than the pages themselves, you know, the neighborhoods in the next, I don't know, because I haven't done a word search to find out.
Fair enough. There, like I said, if there's an applications process, and again, I don't want to speak for somebody else that's on the council that may or may not have gone through a naming scenario with a particular high school, but I think we should leave it up to, if we're going to define the neighborhoods as these boundaries, allow the neighborhoods to come up with whatever name they want. We shouldn't just slap a name.
In every meeting, we've asked people,
Yeah.
you okay with these names? And
nobody's come back, right? It's,
With the option to change. I mean, if somebody came in and says, I really don't like this, we could change it.
yeah, if they wanted to put forth a,
And then with technology, I can just type in Meadows Creek, change it all, and doesn't change the concept,
Yeah.
just change the name.
So the argument then would be is, do we have the neighborhood labels or not? And if you're okay with that, then I think what I heard Steve say, there is flexibility that people would like to change the names to either look at the neighborhood and allow them to make the change or leave them as they are. But the critical component here would be is, do you want the labels? If you're okay with that, then we leave them as they are.
I think it's the use of the labels. If we're using it just as, you know, an application for logistics and stuff like that, you know, oftentimes you'll say, look at the northeast corner, or you'll look at this section, but to use it as a big promotional, I don't believe that's worth funding. And I believe that probably is pretty much removed by taking those other pages out, and or those other that Randy talked about when we go through some of those other maps, Randy and Joe, taking out just some of those.
Catwalks,
Yes,
those programs,
right,
take a lot of stuff out of it. So I'm sensing from your comment, Diane, you're pretty okay at this moment that you can leave the naming of the neighborhoods is okay, now that some of the other issues that were really complicating those neighborhoods is removed.
Using it as, as, you know, you're just talking about it as a section.
as a reference. I
As a
mean, I don't think,
reference.
I don't think we need to go to the expense of
Right.
throwing up signage and doing
Exactly.
branding
No, I'm
and,
not paying.
no,
for any
we're
of that,
no,
right.
no.
Steve?
And,
think
and
you
the
gotta-
program
okay.
enhancements that were already referred to
Correct.
and that sort of thing.
Right.
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 Mhm.
I think you got a green light to go ahead and leave them in.
Cool.
So, I mean, the rest of them, one map is very similar to the next, other than what neighborhood, so it really comes down to, wanted to give, because there was one comment that names are ridiculous. Look at Pleasant Grove, Mud Hole, Monkey Town, Stream Town,
Little Denmark.
I mean, there are worse names out there.
I don't think we're gonna have a Chinatown in our city. I don't think we're gonna have a,
Well, I'd actually like to prefer to change Kingsville to Mud Hole. I want to go to say I live in the Mud Hole section.
Steve, but there is
Right.
the calls. You have to admit, and it's really worthy of a conversation later date. Kingsville gives people a kind of an interesting perspective of that particular corner of the city, Kingsville.
Mhm.
There may be an argument, all the other ones I think make really good sense.
Your neighborhood.
Question, maybe you want to continue with that. Oh, by the way,
I
it's in your
agree.
neighborhood.
You guys.
So, but I hear if we want to come in with a change.
I thought we were known for something else, but I
Well,
can't repeat it in a
Well, we
public
could
meeting.
do
No, I don't.
the two words A and D.
I'm not so sure we should debate right now what that should be, but what Steve said, there is an option, council, if you would like to consider maybe making some slight modifications to the name. And you can almost do that if you'd like to give public input for that. But at this moment, you're okay with the label. But more importantly, we leave them in. Okay, Steve?
So what I've heard, again, from pages 55 to 69.
Nine, yep.
Remove the pedestrian access or catwalks from the maps.
Yes.
Okay, we can definitely do that.
And then every one of those sections has program enhancement list. We talked about that.
And I can remove the program enhancements that were. Because they're all the same other than the description of the neighborhood and name. So we don't necessarily need to go through. I don't think every map. So this one will kind of make the rest of them be the same. So remove catwalks, the references thereof. And the program enhancements that were omitted earlier, I will get those removed.
Now remind me, are all of the traffic calming areas that they're talking about here in our current master transportation plan? I was
I want to
thinking
say yes.
most of them were, but I can't remember
I
now.
want to say yes, but I can double check with Sam.
Thank you. I'd like to just, yeah, make sure that that matches up with the transportation plan, if you don't mind.
Yeah, great comment. Okay, Steve, I think we just jumped all the way to 72.
Gonna make a note, so.
Council, the comment on 72 I made, all I can indicate to you is that the state statute specifically says under general plans, I'll just read it to you so there's no confusion. The population figures described in the general plan shall be derived from the most recent official census or the census estimated by the United States Census Bureau, or if the population figures are not available under the section, an estimate of by the Utah Population Committee. These are 2018 numbers. It was just recommended that we bring the 2020 census numbers in to bring it up to par.
I agree. And I'd like to, there are several places where things need to be updated at this point.
Yeah,
If we
from
could
a
just do that.
statistical
Remember, this
perspective.
Right,
original
no.
document was done in 2019, so
Right, we
I'll
understand that.
All
I'll talk-
statistics. and
talk to
everything.
Sam about updating all these tables that end in 2019 or 18 to get them up to date. So that really kind of goes through.
So your note on that picture was to pull the road.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I saw the three of you.
I told him to-
on this, so.
That was my only
Whoa.
one comment.
Say it again. What's your
The
name?
road through Amarussell.
Oh, yeah.
In the
You're
Kingsville
pulling that one?
neighborhood that I
Pulling
reside
that
in.
one? Yeah,
Kingsville?
thank you.
So, yeah, I'll do.
I
as
saw the
best we
note,
can
but I just
to
wanted to
update
make
all
sure.
those- all those charts.
Really good. Thank you.
Okay, so it takes us to page 79,
Making good
which
progress.
is the existing land use map.
Council, the only comment with this one would be is that there is a plan. If you'd like to see it, I can certainly show it to you. In 2009, UDOT did do the study and it was approved to widen 3,500. There will be a number of houses and businesses that will be impacted. Because these are old farm ranches, their backyards are much bigger than their front. So if they do take the front of the house, there's going to be some deep, deep lots in here. The question then would be is, if there would ever be a time, maybe in 2028, when it's proposed this widening will take place, that you have any intent to go ahead and consider changing the lot zoning from residential to commercial and make a commercial corridor available that runs that entire 5 lanes through 3500 all the way to Midland Drive. You may want to consider, just go ahead and consider putting in here that there may be an option in 2028, 2030 to allow that to be rezoned to commercial. That was the thought.
I think that's a good idea, because already they're complaining about getting out of their parking, out of their driveway. And if they're gonna wind it to 5 lanes, that's gonna make it even more
More of a
traffic
problem.
and.
And then people's jobs, people who live on 5700 are going to be a little problematic because trying to cross that 5 lanes is going to be a real issue getting on that.
Probably
freeway.
medians.
Yeah.
And so there may be some, UDOT will have to make some adjustments there. So, is everybody okay? At least they can consider it?
Yeah,
We want to put it as an option,
Just enough.
yeah, just an option. I mean.
Okay.
And so where would that be?
Commercial corridor.
How would that be written
just
in, or how would that be?
kind of how he's got it
Outlined it.
outlined from about on Midland, where the power line corridor is, all the way down.
And all they have to do is look at it, and maybe at some point in the future, they may want to consider that when what UDOT does. I will tell you, we are pushing to try to get UDOT to expedite that. 3500 is very congested right now. And when the West Davis corridor is finished, the main thoroughfare coming out of Weaver County, lower Weaver County into Davis County to get access to that West Corridor freeway is right across 3500. So it's going to get a lot more congested. So we've asking Wasatch Front Regional Council to see if we can move that up in the schedule and try to get that done in 2025 or 2026.
But you don't know if they're gonna take the west. or
Most of it's
east.
going to the west.
It's also the west.
I've already got the plans if you want to come and look. Most of it's going to the west.
That's right.
But again, in the existing land use, well, actually, I probably won't change this one because this is the existing land use, but I'll change the future land use map to have a commercial. Again, unless someone comes and asks for a rezone, nothing changes. This is just when they do come for a rezone, you have an idea, oh, we wanted it to be commercial, you're asking for commercial, have fun.
Well, what is that, where does that start, like on 4,000? Or
Which one?
4,800, 3,500,
It
widening?
was 6,000.
Well, it ended about the power line corridor on Midland heading south. Jumped down to Syracuse and went up to almost 300 north. And then they've kind of stopped and went somewhere else, leaving West Point, Clinton and us high and dry. Until
So how far north
2028.
will it start?
How
All the
far
way
north?
to
juncture, to the
1900, all the
juncture.
way
It will hit
to.
Midland.
It'll hit Midland.
oh,
and then-
Midland.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a proposal right now to take the Midland Road, even though it turns off and goes up to Hinckley.
Yeah.
The plan is to also widen, and that one will probably happen sooner, to finish the Midland Drive that will run through West Haven and hit 1900. If you're familiar with that corridor
Yeah.
turn right there.
Right.
So you will see a 5-lane up at the 1900, all the way down Midland till it hits 3500, and all the way down 3500 into 2000 in Davis County, and on 2000 all the way down to, I think it's, isn't it down to Antelope Drive? I think it runs all.
That's the whole road, yeah.
That's the
Antelope
five.
Drive
So all
to,
those businesses, that new Fizz and the other Taco Time they're redoing and all that's just gonna be by.
Here's what I'm gonna suggest to you, come look at the drawing.
what should have happened before those developed is UDOT should have given approval for
I know.
the width of the road. Very similar to Bridge Academy and Mike Brodsky for that neighborhood. He's had to go to UDOT. UDOT says, well, we're gonna need 30 feet of this, so don't start your development until that
The
point.
Bridge Academy will be okay, won't it? Or they-
Yeah, they
They're
built
fine. Yeah, they built
with
with
UDOT's
that in mind.
approval of where to be. But right where their fence is the boundary line. So all that no man's land in between the actual pavement and their fence will be a road eventually.
And if you'd like to see them,
Yeah.
Steve says he has a copy of them. You probably will not like what you see, but I have in my thing, I have a copy of them. We need to see what they're planning.
Or I can send you a link to the
It's all been
to the
approved.
online map.
It will have to be adjusted because some of the things they planned on when they approved it in 2009 is not gonna be applicable today. I'm sorry, Steve, go
No,
ahead.
you're good. So page 7, we're on 79.
On 80.
Page 80. There was more of yours. Diane's was it repeated itself, so to me it was a no-brainer to have it removed. Just the word, the whole 3 lines, 4
Just a
lines
typo.
repeated itself.
And the only thing I brought in here, Steve, was in council, really was more about, I like this concept that it talks about wind patterns and when you're in construction. Interesting philosophy. I've heard about this in the big cities, New York, where they have to worry about that. But they're just bringing some awareness to that possibility if in fact downtown, maybe over the next 10, 20 years, gets some larger buildings where maybe wind might be an issue. That was really the only intent. If you agree that that's okay, then leave everything else in there. If you think that's reaching too far, then my comment would be is have it removed. Your call.
I mean, it is interesting information, but is it realistic is kind of what, yeah. I mean,
Are
there's
you
a lot of
suggesting
interesting
we maybe ought to
information
remove
put in
it?
there.
Your call, Diane. What do you want to do?
Well, what do you recommend, Mayor? You've kind of done more studying on it.
Well, my only concern was fundamentally is that it may very well be a valuable tool as the city councils, the city planning office starts to plan what the downtown, in my opinion, 1900 corridor is going to look like in the future. Because if in fact that we do believe that the structures down there may very well represent some type of an issue with wind. And certainly, if you've lived anywhere in the Weaver Canyon, you know we get some significant winds driving down that Weaver Canyon. To the point where they're even talking about, again, putting some wind machines out there to try to capture the energy out of that. Then we certainly do not want a design of a building. I think that, Steve, the logic of that, we don't want the design of the building to be hampering, okay, other developments or other residential components that may be close to downtown. That was really the only thought process. So my comment was not sure how this wind pattern works when designing buildings and streets, but it makes sense. I think it's at least something they should at least consider.
Right.
And that was really the only point.
Fine with keeping it as
Yeah,
is,
I'm fine.
You okay with
leave it
that
in
thought
there.
process?
Yeah.
Okay, Steve, I think we're
Other than
okay
the
with that.
repeat, which I'm
Yeah.
pretty much already done.
Okay,
just typing the thought.
next page, Steve.
I like to repeat myself, but not very often. Just page 81, Diane's question here is, do you really have a tree that can 13 foot?
And the answer is no. I just think that we could talk about street trees and stuff like that, but I just think that, again, we're now getting into, right. And it shouldn't be there. We've got plans and things like that. And for us to try to say something like that in a general plan shouldn't be there. So you could actually remove that whole concept if you want, but, or at least leave it in, but take the 13 feet or higher, because that's just not realistic.
Right now, on the street side, it's a 13-foot clearance. On the sidewalk side, it's an 8-foot clearance. No tree grows like.
So is that what the 13 feet is referencing, or
I believe so.
so it's just a misinterpretation of height of tree?
But I mean, like you said, if we took it,
We-
we took it out, it's not gonna do anything. If we leave it in, really, I mean, Public Works, as they drive down, they mark which tree happened to hit their street sweeper, and then they go back and,
Zap it.
or if someone's walking down the street or walking down the sidewalk, like Kevin, a little taller guy gets hit, mark it.
Happens all the time.
So here's the question. Would you like to leave the highlighted information in or take it out? And you okay with it?
Yeah, I mean, like he says, if it's just in the way, it's.
Yeah, that's what it's referencing. It's not necessarily the top to bottom height.
You're okay with
Oh,
leaving
With
it
the
in?
Right,
canopy
it's
level.
not-
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, totally fine.
leave it in?
Yeah.
Got a consensus?
Because you can control that.
Steve, this one's real easy. This is saying reconcile the 217 Roy and the complete street policy efforts with the 2018 Transportation Master Plan effort and integrate both with overall general plan. I guess my comment would be is we're talking about reconciling, meaning everything that we have inside of those documents now be weaved into the general plan.
Most
will
of
they be
the
standalone
focus,
documents?
Roy, has been, the streets master plan or the complete streets policy is just a separate one. It really is for staff when, like I said, when we go to redo a road, you know, we take out the asphalt and stuff and want to redo the water lines and stuff. We evaluate the road. And can we now make it, you know, with bike lanes, or can we provide this? So it's really not part of, it is part of this a bit, but not all of it.
Okay, so I think what I heard you say, you're going to integrate the 2017 Focus Roy into the general plan. That will now be the Bible, but you're going to retain the complete street policy as a separate one because it provides a lot more clarity and detail.
Right.
You okay with that, Council? Okay. And so that's what reconcile means. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That's all I had on that page.
And when you say you're implementing or integrating it, that just means it will be like an addendum?
No, it really, the focus, Roy, has been, the concepts and stuff have already been put in
Okay,
here.
right.
it
So
kinda
you're not
goes
putting
away.
the
I
whole
mean, yeah.
thing addending it. Okay,
1.1 recommendation is this,
okay.
so in and of itself, it's, okay, so I can't, this page
You're okay
number
with that
happened to,
page? That's good.
this one got removed. Page number.
That is
Transportation.
page
83.
83.
Yep, page
Okay.
83.
I had it marked, but not on here. This one's more of the annual report, joint annual report. I'm not sure who's supposed to do that.
When Public Works already do this as a course of just updating where they're.
But it refers to the public streets, so as we update roads, it really is, we did this road, we did that road.
So it's the Public Works Department that does that?
But I think they already kind of
Yeah,
updated
you
what
okay with
roads
that?
they're doing.
The Public Works takes that annual report requirement if it calls it out.
Because I think they already do it as a due course of what they do.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any.
Maybe you want to be specific and indicates that's a Public Works requirement.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve. Next page.
And I think some of these other ones, it's really, like what does TDM mean?
No, when I looked it up, transportation demand management is the only thing I could find that might possibly work, but
But I'll get with Sam, but those type of things, because there's several others that, on many pages, the parentheses or that are in quotations and stuff like that, we'll just go ahead and take care of.
Perfect.
But I will get with Sam and define.
91.
This is really kind of up to you guys of what you want to do. This particular map kind of shows bike trails and stuff within the streets and elsewhere. So Diane kind of, and it's a good comment, you know, from 48 on 4800 South, it stops at the DNRG trail and, well, actually 2675, can't talk. But doesn't head any farther east along 48. So her thought was, well, why not continue that all the way up to 1900 or beyond? Having a bike path on 48 beyond 2675. Why do I want to say 27 all the time? I mean, it makes sense. I mean,
Makes
again, you
sense to
guys are
me,
gonna
but-
be,
Yeah.
if it's, why stop at 2675? Because people may want to drive a bike down from Hertfordshire to
It's all
48
downhill.
to everything.
Yeah,
else.
I would totally, I would totally bike that. And then I would take
Ride.
the train or bus
You
back
know,
up.
because it's either 4,000 or
It's all
48.
that, yeah.
So I like this thought is just continue it. There's a lot of things, Diane, I like about it.
Any objections to the idea?
Not the idea, it'll be the implementation and
No,
cost.
and again, this is just a
It's not a
concept.
thou shalt, it's a.
This is the concept of trying to make it, you know, bike lanes on streets are always an issue, but as we go through the streets and update them, we try to make them work.
well, one of the things is that the school's right there, and I don't know if kids are starting to ride bicycles to schools or not more, but it seemed to be a safety issue, but Are they?
My daughter just started driving, so.
Sidewalks aren't safe anymore.
Sophie, you okay with that?
I'm glad you said.
I think we got 3 votes on that for you.
Yeah, you're good on the.
This one, page 92, it's already been done, but you know, it is hard to understand on the map the difference between a major and a minor. Even though we know the major barrier really is the railroad track, but I think we just need to change the color or something just to identify it a little bit better. So to me, I'm not gonna ask you, I'm just doing it. This is page 95. Some of them are more questions and stuff rather than just typos. Some are typos because, you know, when we're referring to 3500 South, it's really west.
So I guess my question on that top one is, when they're talking about the Greenway and regional bike corridor designations, is that the map we were just looking at, and or are we referring to some of these other street designations? And I was just wondering, maybe we could clarify. I mean, you know, maybe it's okay, I don't know, but I just wasn't sure what they were. And if you know what those are, then, I know we kind of talked about it, but we weren't sure.
I can definitely get with Sam and find out. This one is really just looking at adopting some sort of greenway or bikeway coordinate designation. I do know Wasatch Front Regional Council is trying to get every city to have the same type of schema, or if on a map it is this line is the same for everybody, or this color or this type of thing. So I'll make sure that's what it is.
Could you then just provide back council more clarification on that? And I think we're
Yeah.
perfect.
I probably won't bring this document back until I've got it all modified up, so I'll have that clarified by then.
And then these just minor changes, clerical. and-
Most of the typos and stuff have already been, I sent those to Sam. So he did it all. So,
It's 96.
Basically, you know, it's that same sort of urban, people in Roy don't, they kind of get upset when they're starting to call us urban, you know, we know that it's happening, but they moved to Roy, they wanted to live in Roy because they didn't want to be in Salt Lake or they didn't want to be in Ogden, and so.
So should we put the streets on a diet?
You went there.
You went there. I'm sure you were in that class, Diane.
Yeah.
The Diet Street.
Yep,
Diet
the Diet
Streets.
Streets, I was. But anyway, so that's my thing is, a few people just said they don't want urban being called in it, when, you know, so, and I'm happy to have it off too. I agree, but just omit that.
It's a word.
Yep.
I'm there. I get
Are
it.
you okay with all your?
Strike that
word.
Remove it.
Are you okay with?
Yeah.
I'm fine because I'm an urbanite.
Yeah.
I'm a suburbanite.
my degree is in urban planning, so I'm a little,
Stretching it,
Iconic defines.
it's not rural planning, it's urban planning.
I think they agreed to go ahead and remove the urban. Is there an issue with high quality active transportation? Is that?
Well, I guess
No, it was just-
what word am I replacing urban with? Because I can have
Just take it
special
out.
design.
Just put special design treatment. Yeah,
The wine
that's
trip.
fine.
Yep.
And the high quality active transportation, that was more of a question, you know, what were they referring to? And are they talking about just bicycling, or are they talking about the trails, and whether or not that needs to be defined or not? That was the question there, you know, what is their definition of high quality? Or I guess we just say it's a word again, and we decide what that is later, but that's my question is all, you know, what were they?
Yeah, I think, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, from your perspective, having a number of mobile transportation elements at a single location may be able to elevate that to a more high quality. So if you looked at the train station, for an example, if you have a bus stop there, you have access with the bicycle, walking, driving, that provides a lot of modal transportation, modal opportunities at a location. I would define that as being high quality because you're able to bring a mixture of different types of transportation mediums.
It's just that if we're adding something, what is it? Do we know what we're adding? And that's why I thought it'd be nice to just discuss it and kind of clarify what that was.
Well, it's specifically asking about a particular road, which is 4400 South. And
Mhm,
4000 South and 5200 South.
Yeah,
I can't answer that, except
I mean, right now, when you look at those access points to DNRG Trail, they're pretty bland.
Yeah, that's right.
Does bland mean in perky or does it mean
Nothing-
in
as
options?
if nothing's
or-
happened.
Diane.
Nothing's happened.
Break out that
Yeah.
encyclopedia.
I've seen some graffiti going on through the city. We can hire them.
Right?
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, one thing I kind of like is if you
Just
take
put up
the,
boards so they can, paint what they want on it.
if you take the DNRG Trail from, well, south of our border, our south border through Davis County, every street that you intersect has a little sign saying which trail you're on and where you're at.
The wayfinding that they were talking about in here.
To me, it's like, why not continue that same sign in Roy? You're in Roy,
Uh-huh.
4400 South, Roy, 5200 South. And to me, that's kind of giving it a little higher quality.
Okay,
And then as we develop a lot around there, curb gutter, sidewalk, little enhancements. So
Then I say with that
Good
definition,
idea.
leave it as it is.
Yeah.
It at least gives them a trigger to think about. Okay?
page 97, most of those, Mayor, are yours.
Just a couple here, council. Create small blocks and connect streets, networks in the downtown area. This was an issue come up in the chapter 13 conversation, if you remember. It was recommended that we kind of not
I agree.
create new
Yeah.
streets down there. The idea would be is, do you want to not do that? Or do you want to now introduce that as part of the general plan? That really was the first one.
I agree that it should be taken out of the general plan because of what you mentioned. We've got a limited area there and why not utilize it for for something that's active and
So
useful?
if someone comes in and says, I want a street here,
So then discuss it at that time, but not necessarily kind of promote it or.
this kind of gives me saying, well, this is kind of what we'd like.
Mhm.
If you want a street,
Well.
it's not in here, I don't know if I can allow it.
Well, then you could talk to us, but I don't know that it's what we like. I don't know that it's what we
Anything the
want.
council votes on.
Yeah, let him vote on it, but not
'Cause I
necessarily.
know of one 5700 South where the credit union is, there may be a road going east. But that's one of the options UDOT's requesting is you provide an intersection right there. So you can have left turns in and right turns in a mountain.
Oh,
or
okay.
a Firestone building.
Mad America.
Well, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
this should be consistent with our code that we just adopted, and that was taken out of the code. And it doesn't mean that it can't be done in the future, but I don't think it means that we're wanting to encourage it.
So
You're almost suggesting, Diane, with the comment that you would expect that to come back to the council for final approval
Yes,
versus just being incorporated and allow the planning commission to make that
Yes.
distinction.
yes, please. I definitely think I agree, yes.
Okay,
Also on 2.5, I think that just talks about the cul-de-sacs, just a heads up for you that that's one other place you'll
okay.
just want to look at.
Let me just see if I got confirmation. It's been proposed that we remove 2.4, which is the creation of small block and connected streets out of the general plan. One is agreed. Is there two more of you agree that should be removed? Or do you want to leave it in?
If we leave it in, they can.
It just
They can
gives,
move
it gives
forward
Steve a
with it.
tool that he can move forward with.
My question is going to be is if a developer says, here's this development and I need a road right here, what are you going to do? You're going to say no?
Well, you can come to us and
You
then
say
we
yes.
decide at that time.
Here we'll say, we're encouraging that type of development, or if you don't have it in, I'm going to
It's up to their
discourage the
discretion.
developer from doing it.
Oh, I agree with
Right.
that.
Well,
Take
and the other
it
thing
out.
I learned last week, if you're gonna say thou shalt not, you better have valid reason why.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing we should keep it.
I heard,
I think take it out. I think just remove it.
what do you want to do, Sophie?
I say take it out, but
Okay, Randy?
only,
Sure. Take it out.
Okay, we got 3 votes, take out 2.4. And the other two only just basically talk to the issue about what's already unfolding.
Yeah.
And that's okay, we can reference the Roy in there because it really kind of started, Steve, there, and that's okay to leave it. But council just recognized that a multimodal corridor is now being developed on 5600 South. And also there is already an approved kind of a multimodal that's been approved on 3500 West. And those are UDOT roads, and they've already put plans in motion to get those widened and developed. My comment to you would be is if you have not seen those, I encourage you to ask Steve or let me know and we'll get you to see those because they are unfolding, okay? So leave them as they are because it's just referencing information. I don't see any reason to remove them, but before the ink of this gets dry, it's probably going to happen. This will already be done for the most part, okay? I think that's okay. Steve, let's go ahead and move on.
Next one is page 98.
This one, just a reverb of restatement of what was already just discussed. If you're okay, based on what you just decided. Number 2 on that list, it's highlighted. We just simply remove that. That goes back to that small block. Okay. And then it says streamline and slow on mobility on 1900 West Corridor. Steve, my only comment, this is a fascinating comment because council, we oftentimes look at the 1900 West Corridor as really being the, for a better word, the main thoroughfare through the east side of the city. It is the main corridor.
Main Street. I mean,
It's going to be wide.
when somebody says, where's your Main Street? That's
That's the main street. But this was suggesting that, and it's further in this document, suggesting we probably put more emphasis to have most of the traffic diverted down 3500 and try to make this a little bit homogeneous to allow a lot more walking traffic as a downtown typically would be, is like in Salt Lake, where you have a lot more mobility for people walking and biking than you do have for traffic. That's an interesting concept, but I will just indicate to you, we don't own 1900. And I guess if we leave it in here, which I'm okay with it, but it would require some interesting conversation with UDOT to allow that to continue as proposed.
Well, the kind of.
well, streamline and slow. Let's,
UDOT's already trying to limit the number of access points on 19 Midland, 35, 56. So every time a new development comes in or someone buys it, like the chicken and rice place that's right over here, someone is looking to put in another restaurant, they had to go to UDOT for approval. And UDOT was like, well, this access point may not happen. They're trying to start already eliminating access points. So
that can happen, but when people were talking to me about the street medians, that was the #1 road that they were most upset about because they didn't want it to be, they didn't want to slow it down and they want to be able to move back and forth. And so,
I remember when the Focus Roy study was voted on, that's kind of, there was a little bit of a outcry about that. Like I say, I mean, we can say what we want, how we want it to look, but at the end of the day, UDOT's probably going to do what they want.
but I would hate for us to be promoting that we want to have it slowed down because that I don't think is an accurate representation of the biggest percentage of our citizens.
So with that comment, you propose and we take number 6 out?
I agree with that. I
Okay,
propose
we have a proposal to take line number 6 out of this document. Comments?
in essence, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. We're not in control of 1900.
But on the other hand, if the choice comes up and it says we're encouraging that,
Yeah, we at least have something we can point back to that we can say, UDOT, we put this in our general plan.
but, or we want to take it out, because in my opinion is we don't want to be, our citizens don't want us to be slowing traffic down through 1900. They want to be able to get through the city or to the freeway.
What are we talking about when we're talking the 1900 West Corridor? Are we talking 6,000 to Riverdale Road? Are we talking?
That's the preponderance of it. But
Right.
the argument would hold that if you wanted to make a longer corridor, 1900 goes all the way to
Oh, yeah.
West Haven.
Right.
No, maybe in
Yeah, it goes,
2050
I
or
mean,
something.
theoretically, it goes to, from basically the overpass
Mhm.
to 6,000.
So what would you like to do? You can leave it in there certainly, or you can take it out. What would you like to do?
One vote for take it out.
I mean, as much as we call that our main street, I'm not sure it's ever gonna look like Main Street in Bountiful.
It won't.
Correct, true.
I mean,
There's
there's,
more like Main Street, Washington Boulevard in downtown Ogden.
That's how it would look.
which now they're putting a rapid bus line down the middle of it.
Okay, leave it in or take it out?
I think
Comments?
take it out.
Okay, we got 2 to take it out. Is there a third to take it out?
So moved.
So moved, yeah.
Okay, if you'll just remove number 6, Steve, thank you.
Page 99. Only for the regional partners,
Oh,
the really UDOT, UTA, Union Pacific,
yeah.
all the big people.
Mhm. Yeah, so I don't think there's anything there.
You okay with those?
Mhm.
Okay, move on from 99 to 100.
And on 100, I believe, I was wondering if they were referring to the different map. And so I think you were going to ask them, maybe Steve, right?
Haven't got a response.
Maintain low vehicle speeds on residential. If you look at the maps, residential connector versus neighborhood connector is, I think that the purpose is a little bit different there, so.
You're referring to those, traffic maps, road maps.
Right, so maybe, let me just look here. Yeah, so then we can actually just, so the neighborhood one is now the neighborhood greenway and the, so do residential connector where, oh, I don't even think they have a residential connector.
We
So,
moved the neighborhood connector and neighborhood.
Connector,
greenway from
right.
The whole document.
so I think that, so when they say maintain low vehicle speeds on residential connector network, we don't even have residential connector network here unless we just want to call it regional complete corridor or citywide or, I'm not really sure on 28 and 29 what they were referring to. And now that we've removed the 44 and 45,
Right.
I don't even know if we need them, if we should just take them out.
Are you suggesting then that we remove 28 and 29 from the book?
Do we define, we don't have a definition of residential connector, is that what I'm hearing?
We don't have a definition of that.
That's her argument.
Well, that makes sense then to
Yeah.
take them out.
You okay with taking them out? Okay, got 3 to take them out. So if you would, Steve, please take out 28 and 29.
Well, yeah, because you referenced the neighborhood connector, which we
He's
removed,
gonna
right?
give us more information.
Yeah, I think he's gonna. try to get
102?
a key on that. Oh, and I think they're gonna fix that map too, that
Yes,
the
what it
wasn't
said.
complete on 102 as well.
The next one is 103. Yours. All of them.
It was more comment about not so much the idea wasn't a good idea. To be honest with you, Steve, I couldn't make a correlation between this particular paragraph as it relates to economic development.
Street and trail connectivity is big for people that are moving out of state, from coming out of state.
So you're indicating, keep it as an economic development because it talks about a more quality of life.
Correct, it's a quality of life thing, and that's an economic driver to bring people in.
Could we then, with that statement, maybe Steve, you can weave in that this is really more referencing a quality of life component and how that may, and I would say just quality of life. And that's how you make the connection economic development. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay, you okay with that, council?
Mhm.
Okay, I think that would work, Steve.
Yeah.
Downtown, about establishing another medical facility, I was just suggesting, how about a hotel? Maybe over the next
Yes.
10, 15 years,
I think
maybe a
the
hotel.
Previous pages, we kind of changed it to put hotel.
Perfect.
I like
Okay,
it.
that's perfect.
No problem putting that.
That would be perfect. And the only thing I had, Steve, on number 3 on the list, we're developing those 3 CRAs. Maybe you can just wait to the very last moment, just make a comment. Where we get on the CRAs, you just bring this document up to where that baseline is, and that would be all there is. Nothing wrong with having the CRAs, just make it current at the moment by which you finalize this document. I think that'll work perfect. Thank you. Okay, we're on page 105, council. And this may be yours.
This is Diane.
No, this is mine.
Oh, I'm sorry, Diane.
So I was just thinking the 300,000, it's just probably an update on the numbers again, so you'll be checking onto that. And then I believe that the NIMBY references should be removed because a lot of citizens take that very derogatory, and people that talk about it, when they talk about it, they are using it derogatorily, and then the citizens of the city can become offended. Now, public opinion is what we're talking about, but to use an acronym like that and to use, and is often almost always used in a derogatory manner, I think it should be removed because of that. Public opinion is one thing, but not to use that extra little oomph and stick it to you. There you have it.
Like saying those things.
Well, let's see if we can understand where she's coming from.
I'll just hashtag it from now on. I'm gonna hashtag NIMBY like everywhere for you, Diane.
She brings up an excellent point. First, are you okay with omitting from this document, not my backyard? Based on the fact is it's more of a public opinion rather than, as she defined it, maybe more offensive.
Yeah, I
Okay,
agree.
so where it says not my backyard, please, if we can omit that. I got 3 votes. Perfect. And did you want to talk a little about the 300,000 at the top?
I believe that that's the number that, if we're going to check to see if that's still offered, or are we still offering that, I guess,
In the RDA.
in our RD? Is it still
Yeah.
there? That's all it was,
Yeah.
because I just wanted to make sure it was
It's in the
still
RDA.
being offered.
Yeah, we have
That's
not
all.
removed that yet, so.
And then the other thing is the public infrastructure district. I was just wondering, is that something that we're creating, or PID means a lot different in my profession, but I was just wondering
Well,
what
again,
PID.
when it's a SWOT analysis, I don't know if someone made that comment, is it really
Uh-huh.
best to take it out? I don't mind
I-
removing.
And I
NIMBY
don't even
because
say
it's-
removing it. I'm just saying, I'm not really sure
yeah,
what
I'm
it
not sure where it came
references,
from or
where it
what,
comes
but
from.
Again, if someone made comment on
Yeah.
a SWOT analysis.
Just because I have a question doesn't mean it has to be removed. I just don't know. Okay,
So what we're gonna do with it? Leave it in? You okay with that?
I mean, I'm okay with leaving it in. I was just wondering if anybody can tell me what it is.
Well, it's like a PUD. Unless you understand what the acronym stands for and the meaning behind it, PUD seems to be offensive.
But
But
if
there
we're
is-
gonna say like a PUD or a
This
PUD,
one,
if you're gonna talk, is that what they're talking about? Is a PUD or a PUD
if we had a sewer lift station, that'd be a public infrastructure district.
district?
If we had other type of.
Is there a
things-
way? Yeah,
I mean, we do
great.
have.
That's all I
a sewer
want to
lift
know is what
station
they're
on the west
referring
side of
to.
town.
That's all. Just wondering
We
what it
need one
was.
on the, Northeast.
Kingsville has it.
we need one on the northeast side of town too.
Very true.
It's coming.
But other cities, West Point has probably 20 of them. Hooper's gonna have 30 or 40 of them.
Because we're on a hill and that stuff kind of flows downhill.
That's why those who live in Syracuse.
If you ever want a tour of what downhill is, I can take you out and give you
Randy?
a tour of it.
We're digging too deep into the sewer district.
Exactly. We're getting too far into the, crap.
So some of these, like I mentioned before, like what is CDBG, because it wasn't defined earlier, what is Crown, what is HUD?
You
Roy
got those
City, is parentheses, in parentheses plus quotations, AAGR, those ones will just, again, typos and stuff will make them consistent. The next page.
Updating staff.
More of these are just updating these tables. Again, it's, I will ask, see if we can get it done.
Okay, you okay with that, Steve? Just update? Perfect.
And then
In
make
fact,
it so I don't
think-
have to do a Google search. for
It
all
probably
these
changed since
acronyms.
last week, so you might want to update it.
Yeah.
I was reading that email. you
Yeah,
sent.
at some point there, we're gonna just have to draw a line and say, as of this
Exactly.
date.
Say,
and-
yeah, like
Yeah.
next time.
As
like,
of-
As
yeah.
of when it's adopted, right?
Yeah, that's as close as you can get to the adoption date.
Yeah.
Can I assume on 108, you've also looked at those acronyms and you're gonna
Yeah,
update those?
Yeah.
most of these are just things we,
So
I didn't want to take
109,
them out because Diane had made mention of
111,
it. and-
yeah, 109, 111, it's all the same thing.
Yeah, it's all just, yeah.
Okay. In fact, we're moving all the way through 111, so.
117.
And
117.
Yeah, 117, you
Okay.
get into stormwater detention and retention facilities.
Okay. Go ahead, Diane.
This is, again, just a question of, we had this from the original document to this current document for the level of service, it, is 3.5 now, and I was wondering, do we care if we know where that number came from, why it suddenly went down, and just for the calculations? So more than anything, I think it's just a point of of information and,
Doesn't it call the loss calculation of the right-hand column meeting loss needs through build out?
Well, what she's saying is the original one that came out in 2019 had a different number than this
Than
one.
this one.
and I was just wondering, how did they decide, oh, we're gonna go down 2 points or
Right.
whatever, you know?
A wise man once told me there's lies, there's damn lies, then there's statistics. This looks like a statistic.
There you have it.
So
So anyway,
Let's see, is that recorded?
Sounds like a class I took of statistics. I mean,
Where is that? You got that on
It
recorded?
is recorded.
I'll
I'll be
Multiple
expecting to read
formats.
that in the minutes there.
All right.
Brittany.
the lies.
Gee, Randy.
and then my question on the proposed parks is, it says it is also recommended that storm water detention, retention facility are not counted. And I was wondering, are we already counting that?
No, but that's a little misleading because if you kind of look at Russell Park, probably the preponderance of Russell is actually retention basin. And so the fact that we play ball in it or do something in it is probably great. But I think its primary role would be is to capture any runoff that would come out of the housing development that's actually to the east. So based on your comment, is your comment more about, it is also recommended that stormwater retention and
Yeah, I just
retention
wasn't,
and retention facilities are not counted?
Well, I'll ask Sam and hopefully have a response.
yeah, because I'm just wondering, does that now suddenly change? If we were already calculating that, does that now change our need or not?
Good question.
That's all. I don't.
And Russell's a big park, and to be honest with you, if it's out of that calculation, it's gonna add a few acres. in
Yeah.
The
it.
dog park, 57 and the.
Right, yeah.
Okay. good
Count that
argument.
as, you know, it is a detention pond.
And then I was just
118.
wondering on park standards, are these the park standards that they're talking about? Are these the minimum standards? Do we have another area of park standards? I was just wondering where that fits in. Do we now refer everybody to the general plan for our park standards, or do we have another place for park standards?
I'll ask.
Okay.
That clarification.
So you're gonna ask on that one, Steve? Okay, perfect.
I'm just trying to get to all those,
You're doing good.
and change them to the bottom or not.
We're on page 121. I think the only issue, and I apologize, Travis would be a much better person to articulate this. Matt, maybe you have some insight. This suggests is that we're 9 short on playgrounds, but we are 8 over on baseball fields and softball fields. My only comment was more or less, could we, because these are important numbers, if you use this as a guide going forward, I would probably argue, don't put any more baseball fields or football fields in, but rather may convert some of those. But I'm not so sure that's accurate. Travis may very well say, it says, I'm not 8 over, I need maybe 2 more, but without his expertise or Jody's expertise, I'm a little concerned about what these numbers may or not say.
We could double check with them. One thing is that Roy City Recreation houses a lot of the baseball programs and things, but not so for soccer. That's all privatized, so.
That's correct. Is it, Steve, you okay with this idea? Could we just get Travis to take a look at the chart on 121 and give us the latest?
We can, but this chart really is more of a national level of
You know,
population to these fields. So really, and it's not saying, get rid of those 8. If Travis says, we need those 8,
They can tell you they're
We're not-
utilizing all. of
we're
them.
not gonna lose it. But when it comes down to developing a new park, should it be a softball field or should it be a playground? Those are types of the numbers, it's more like make it a playground rather than a softball field.
so you see it really more that kind of a tool than it is to try to take away or
Right.
add an exist. Okay.
Because Travis will argue with me all day long, "No, you're not taking away any more of my
I know.
ball."
But by the same
By a
token,
national level, we may have
Exactly.
more than we're supposed
But
to.
if it comes
Sure.
up, if it comes up to possibly take it away, this makes it look like it would be okay. And
yes,
I believe that even though it's a national, number, I think this general plan needs to be fine-tuned to Roy and Roy needs. And so that's why I'm a little concerned leaving that national standard in for a Roy specific general plan. Or document it,
And if
maybe.
Travis can come up with these
New York
same
says
numbers
one
in the
thing,
same chart, I'll let him, but
Okay,
I don't think he has that capability or interest to do it.
Well, but here's the reason, Diane, and I think we were on the same page, and Steve, it's only from that perspective. If I was look this to be the 10, 15, 20-year projections, and the city was to come in and simply says, we need to basically have more tennis courts because it shows two. I'll be honest with you, I would probably say, given the shift from tennis more to pickleball, that the emphasis would shift more to agree to a pickleball, which says we're okay with 4 and focus increasing that, then I would go up there and try to support an idea of putting 2 more tennis courts in. Even though the national chain may show that, I would indicate that I would think that 0 on tennis courts and probably add 4 or 5 more pickleball courts would be much more indicative. And Steve, only from Diane's perspective, that would bring this in line with what Roy City's needs are and not necessarily Miami's. And I think that would be the logic. But let me offer this, Steve, Matt. I think for the benefit of the council, could you just have Travis and Jody take one look at it, get some feedback, and then we'll be done.
They already
Yeah.
have, but we can have them relook at
They
it.
like that?
They,
They missed it. That's okay, help them out. Focus their direction
Oh, okay.
or direct their focus.
When I see Travis, I'll say, man, Travis, are you sure you agreed with that table?
So we have,
85-2.
we have 3 people that want them to look at it, right? So it's
I've-
okay
I've
for us
marked
to do
it.
that? Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
page 122.
There are few publicly accessible open spaces in the city. So I wasn't really sure what that was referring to either. What does that mean? Does that mean parks? Or
Green space.
green space or? Because if we're saying we don't have something, we ought to know what it is we don't have, I guess, if we're trying to fix it. Is there that whole sentence says, in order to make it better and preserve it, the tools identified later should be considered. Publicly accessible open spaces. I just think that that needs rework because it needs rework.
Here's how I interpret that, and Steve, I think Diane may have hit it, council, if you agree. There are few public accessible open spaces, and the open space would be green spaces. And based on what we should have, which I believe they're asking for either 54 more acres or 23 more acres, those numbers are inside here. That would lend to the argument, Diane, that there are few. There isn't enough. And
So
we need
that's
to
what it's
add
calling
more
out, right?
to meet that standard. And I think that's what they're referring to. But maybe rewording that a little better, because this document does talk about adding at least a
Mhm.
minimum of 23 more acres or as
Mhm.
high as 54 more acres of parks. Public accessible open space.
I'm throwing in the word available after spaces. Would that clarify? Because again, that's what we're calling out.
And we, maybe the problem would be is open spaces may be a problem because we oftentimes reflect in terms of parks.
Correct.
The title's open spaces, the parks is actually above it.
Correct.
But open spaces may be a little misleading in terms of saying that. And I think Diane's point, Steve, if you're okay with this, and council, you're okay, maybe just a clarification of what that's intended to mean. Are you okay with that? You okay with that? Okay. Can you help us with that, Steve? Just a little more clarification on that.
You're right, because if they are referring to parks, why wasn't put
Yeah.
up there?
Or the
Exactly.
availability of land to put in more parks, because if you go based on the paragraph above it,
Right.
at the beginning, we call out where 43.9 acres of land that we would
Mhm.
need to acquire.
To acquire, and that's 30, and this was one was 54. And there was-
Right, so it's a
Right,
moving
it's-
target, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, we'll need to get that one. Okay, 125. This was the
Adjusted
issue
for
about
inflation.
clarifying whether or not it's 28 more acres or 54 more acres.
Yep.
To fill the gap in terms of park requirements.
Yep, if they could get that consistent. that'd be
Are you okay with that? Just get some consistency in what,
Yeah.
because
How
I've
much-
seen 54.
good.
How much park space are we going to pick up with 5,600?
We don't know.
Until
We
they-
had an interesting conversation, didn't we?
Anyway, I'm just, not to play, I am playing devil's advocate. Okay, continue.
Fully designed it, no idea.
Okay, so what I think I heard Steve would be is if we can just standardize a number, because there's about 2 or 3 different numbers that might be. Okay. So now on page 126,
Same thing, just the update of cost, which they'll be doing.
you okay with that?
Yeah, they're just gonna update them, I think.
And then,
128.
And then on 128, I'm just wondering, it says adopt minimum development standards for parks is detailed in the master plan, and I'm just wondering, what is the master plan? Is it a parks master plan? Travis has a master plan. Do we have one? So I'm not sure where it's detailed, that's all. And Steve wasn't sure, so does anybody else know?
It's saying adopt one, so, I mean, it's not existing.
But it says adopt minimum development standards for parks as detailed in the
In the
master
master
plan, so,
Makes it
so I'm
sound
not
like there is
sure.
one.
Yeah, it makes you think there is one. So I don't know if that's under Travis's department, but if we could just find out where and what that is.
well, I think Steve just mentioned there is none. Are you
Well,
suggesting? that
she
we
says
develop one?
as detail, like as detailed means that it's already existing.
Okay.
So I'll ask what they were meaning by that and just clarify.
Okay, perfect.
And we already mentioned that the top part, it says promote the preservation of utility quarters and remaining farmland. Well, I mean, you can leave it in all you want, but we just rezoned all the fundamental agriculture land, but anyway. But this isn't adopted yet, right? So,
That's right.
so then when it's adopted, it's too late. So, perfect, cool. And then we come down to policy 2.1, minimum standard of performance. I was wondering, where is that minimum standard of performance as well? Where do we find that? Do we have a minimum standard of performance? And is that part of the master plan for parks? Because if we are wanting it to meet a minimum standard, I was just thinking we should know what it is we're meeting.
What is the minimum
It
standard?
sounds like we need a little clarification on that. If you can help us with that too, Steve. Comment.
And then if we go to page 129, provide amenities and facilities to help Roy residents, I guess that's broad, you know, I just wasn't sure. Maybe that's like showers at the bike station, I don't know. But Roy residents self-maintain their parks and park facilities. I was wondering what self-maintain means. Does that mean have a garbage can there? Does that mean we're gonna have volunteer units? And with quotation marks, it makes me think that somewhere, somehow we know what that means. And I
Maybe
just,
clean their crap up when they leave.
or if it's like the dog park. So
Again,
anyway, I was
provide
just
those
wondering.
amenities and facilities, so bags for your dogs, garbage cans to put things
Garbage
in,
cans.
so
Okay.
residents can self-maintain their stuff.
You okay with that, council?
I mean, so if that's clear and we've got that, that's great. And then implementation measure on the top of the right, it says conduct feasibility studies to determine the needs. And I was just wondering, you know, whose budget is that under? Is that, I guess it doesn't really matter. We can probably just leave it. And then work with the Roy Transportation and Engineering Departments. So I was just wondering what the Transportation Department was. Is
is how
that
I would
Public
interpret
Works or
that.
is that Steve's department? I was just wondering what that department
Matt,
is.
where would you see that fitting better?
I would guess it's suggesting public works.
Public
Yeah, 'cause
Works.
they
Streets
control
departments, yeah.
streets and roads.
So is it
Well,
possible to
I'll
maybe?
clarify, and if it is public works, we'll just put in.
Yeah,
Okay,
Public Works.
thank you.
Okay. Council, we're almost to the end. Been a good session. Let me just cover a couple things on the last page. The general plan does authorize, and it's a may, not a required, that you can add other components to the general plan if you want to look at different types of strategies or goals. Certainly, is a component that talks about environmental issues in there already. We could elaborate on that because of the plume issue, and there's current information that we can enhance that a little bit that talks about some of the things that's happening there. Water conservation, Steve will tell you, in Senate Bill 110 this year was approved, and between now, I believe in 2025, Steve, the Planning Commission has to come back to the City Council with a very comprehensive water conservation plan. I have read it. And I will tell you, it's going to push the Planning Commission to levels they have never experienced before. It does get interesting. Well, and you've got some of that. House Bill 121. Let me just talk just a couple, because some of these you may say it's not an issue, and I'm okay with that. But if you choose and would like to consider these becoming some part of this plan, then, or if you believe that these are better served maybe in a 5-year strategic strategy plan, which would not necessarily be included in the general plan, but would augment the general plan, then we can certainly take those. But let me just cover a couple of things I'd just like you to think about. We are still pursuing a new cemetery. That we're still moving in that, whether you choose to want to put that in the plan as being a success as we get this approved and moving forward. But if there's one topic up there that I have the greatest concern, and I'll tell you just right now because of my exposure to it, the Ogden Airport impacts to Roy City over the next 2 or 3 years, if we don't get our arms around and understand that effectively, will be dramatic. If they fulfill what they're planning to fulfill, the impact to Roy City will be significant. Now, you can say, well, let's let the people of the future deal with that. And that's going to be a different council. Surely will probably be a different mayor. But at the end of the day, what we can try to influence as a body and try to move the target a little bit right or left today will have a lot more influence in getting what we think we can get at the end than if in fact they do the 150, FAA 150 study and that gets approved, then you have no more choices.
Is that basically Mona Vista? Is that the only place it would impact?
Well, we don't know, but the 150 study certainly would deal with the residential component by the airport, but sound doesn't care by borders or streets. If the 150 study shows a 65 decibel noise that crosses 1900 into the subdivision that's across on the west side of 1900, then they all also have to be dealt with under the 150 study. My point there might be is we might have some dialogue or influence. Now, again, I'll just restate, these are issues that at least I think are things that are coming and things we have to work on. But whether you choose to want to incorporate them in this document or we have a further conversation as far as the 5-year strategic strategy plan, where you see these need a lot more focus and a lot more attention, let's make that determination here. So whether we infuse some of this into this general plan or we shift. But as Steve is indicating, Senate bill, he's showing House Bill 121. There is some influence there, but definitely Senate Bill 110 is going to require a pretty healthy change to the general plan in dealing with water conservation. That one will find its way into the plan, guaranteed. The rest of them don't have to be if you don't want them. Comment.
If it's determined that you guys would like a couple of these other sections in the general plan, it goes back to the planning commission. It cannot start here. The planning commission by law has to give a recommendation to you.
That's right.
So even if this is something you want to lean to, which could be, Steve's wish list for future stuff to do, we won't be doing it today in this plan.
That's a
There'll
good
have to
comment.
be a separate section like the water conservation. That's one that the state just came out with. I have to do it. But I don't have to have it done by 2025. So I've got time, but it's on my burners to start looking at.
Right.
So there's things that the state's now starting to require that we're going to have to do.
That's right.
But the planning commission has to look at it first. You can't just all of a sudden, amend this to have that chapter in there and all of a sudden have it done.
So I have a question then in regards to that. What I think I hear you saying, if you could just clarify it, if we add our interest of the Ogden Airport impact into our general plan, does that safeguard the city and the residents? Is there enough power in that general plan to safeguard the residents? So
No, I should say it's an
there's-
eminent domain situation, correct?
Well, it's
No.
two, it's a different, here's the
It's
conversation.
not a transportation item.
Yeah.
Yeah. What,
Well, they'd have to manipulate the code in order to do it.
yeah, the law says today, for them to fulfill what they're required to fulfill under their plan for the Ogden Airport would require what's called a boundary adjustment. The law says today to get an approved boundary adjustment, both the Roy City Council and the Ogden City Council would have to agree. If any one of those councils said no, it goes nowhere. But that's not to say, and I'll just be blunt with you. If they get an approved 150 study from the FAA, the law says that they can apply for a FAA grant, not a loan. And the grant from the FAA could fund up to 90% of the costs to buy those properties that are in Roy.
So how do we protect ourselves from that?
That's the strategy. These define, the idea would be is these are the issues. And then behind this becomes implementation strategies that have to be carried off to try to find ways to mitigate. And the way to mitigate some of this may very well be that we try to find a way to get Ogden, for example, Ogden Airport or Ogden City to find some type of a collaboration to figure out what's best for both Roy and Ogden Airport as we move forward. There's nothing in place today to do that. We've approached Ogden, I've approached him, Matt's been there 3 times in an effort to have this dialogue, but that dialogue has to happen. But those are the implementation strategies. And they're managed by, in essence, they're managed by the city and then reviewed constantly by the city council. That's a big one. I'm telling you the issue in terms of the environmental issue, we still have a TCE plume under the south side of Roy City. And my biggest concern has always been as it comes down and the water table, because it's just sitting in the water table, as the water table comes down about 3100 west, the water table is getting to the surface. Now up north where Brian Saxton in, it's deep. But they actually have concerns where they drilled the wells and they're trying to extract it, the Air Force is, right down on the trail. That's a big issue. And interesting enough, Matt and I, a couple of years ago, went door to door to door, trying to convince people that simply says the Air Force will come in and do a sample of the air to make sure you're not being contaminated. And interesting enough, a lot of people didn't want that done. And yet they could very well be breathing this trichloroethylene, which is a known carcinogen. They could be breathing in their house and not know it. And yet the Air Force is ready to help. So the strategy has to be to put more emphasis to convince the people and businesses who live under that plume to be able to have it checked at no cost, just to keep our residents safe. That is not a one-time issue. That has been an ongoing issue, but you have to have a strategy to keep pushing that.
So the benefit for having that strategy or the Ogden Airport strategy in the general plan versus another document, what's the pros and cons? Why would we want to consider having it in the general plan versus just doing its own document?
Great question. And the reason why the general plan, in my opinion, Steve can clarify because he's the expert, is only that the general plan is not a 5-year. It is a 5, 10, 15 year. And they recommend every 2 or 3 years to try to modify it. So long after this city council is no longer in the city council, the next city council, the next mayor, the next city manager will have a document that basically talks to these issues so it doesn't ever lose insight in terms of the management team. My biggest fear has always been that the things we have learned, the things we know, it becomes tribal only from the standpoint that suggests is that it's good for us as long as we're huddling and we're talking it. But as soon as we all move out, if there is not any supporting documentation that leaves a legacy of the things that are important, things we've learned from this experience, then the bottom line becomes is that it may be lost. A good example is Emma Russell Park. Some of you may have not been around, but Emma Russell Park used to be an aquarium. And interesting enough,
Yes, it used to be.
it's a nice place. It created some problems with some residents down there, but it was great. But before it was that, I used to dump stuff in there. That was the dumping place. I got mattresses in
So
there.
you're the one that caused all that
I
problem.
caused it. So the point is that if there's a talk about putting a road across there, don't you think tribal wisdom that says, I've been there, I know that should not tell the people the future, please don't put a road in the middle of that dump?
So are you proposing that we could maybe like do addendums to the general plan, like the water conservation thing will be an addendum?
It can be, but let me offer a different maybe a different school of thought. This is the main document. The general plan is by far the most important document. But if you agree with the principle that says there are 3 other important documents that are complementary to this, the strategic plan, a 5-year strategic plan, it never goes off the strategic plan and keeps getting renewed. The transportation plan, already approved, already in place. It'll tell you about calming circles. It'll tell you about roundabouts. It'll even tell you where the streetlights are supposed to be. It's all in there. And the economic development strategic strategy plan, which will talk about what we're going to do for economic development. If you simply allow this to be a kind of an overarching, and whether it has these things in it or not is not relevant unless you find value in it. But as long as you agree that the 3 complementary plans are active and worked, and you're reviewing them at least on a regular basis, maybe twice a year, then that can keep this idea alive. So no matter who comes in and what changes may take place, there's always a record of tomorrow, what is happening and what we're doing to resolve it. That was the premise.
Right.
I'm comfortable if he simply says, you know what, the water conservation just got put into the law. Steve, as he indicated, by 2025, will have to have approval by the city council of a water conservation plan in the general plan. But there's nothing else on here that has to be in the general plan, but it could be, based on what we agreed here today, it will be an integral part of the 5-year strategic strategy plan, which is complementary to some of the things happening in the general plan. It's really your call. But Steve's point is well taken. If you choose to simply says, hey, I'd like some of this to go in there, then for me, what I need to do is I need to take what I have, send it to Steve. Steve needs to infuse that into the planning commission. And the planning commission has to take all the input and present a recommendation back to you, because this is by law, starts with the planning commission and comes back to you for approval. If you do not believe fiber optics is important to the planning commission and you'd rather have that not be part of the planning commission's responsibility, then I say to you, then put it into the 5-year strategic strategy plan, and the council and senior staff will focus on these elements. It's your call.
So let me just clarify, you're saying that the loss of this information could occur if we only have it in a 5-year strategic plan, but somehow if we attach it to the general plan, then it won't be lost, even though it's a 5-year strategic plan.
The 5-year strategic plan, in my opinion, and Matt maybe has some input on this, it's a living document. So if there's an element in there suggesting is we need to keep our eye on, for a better word, the Ogden Airport issues, then every year we update that 5-year plan. And so as we find something new, we put it in there. We find successes, accomplishes, maybe we put it in there. But the 5-year plan is always 5 years in advance. But here's the key. There are implementation strategies and action items that have to be done to help us address what's coming from the Ogden Airport. That will not happen in this general plan. It doesn't have that kind of clarity at the implementation level. It could reference it, but it doesn't have the clarity of it. It is the strategic strategy plan that will have the actionable assignments and expectation times that are in that document. And it's that document you ought to be working with. That's the document you should be wanting the changes and watching the changes happen. And if you come up with a great idea of how we deal with fiber optics, then I say, let's put it in the 5-year strategic plan. Every time you want to make a change to this document, it has to go back by law to the planning commission. You don't have any say in that. You can certainly add anything you want, but you cannot circumvent the authority in the law that says the planning commission is the start point. They make a recommendation to you, and you as a council then either agree to it or don't, or change it.
So what I hear you saying is, if we put most of these topics in the 5-year strategic plan, we actually will be able to, it will be more effective and efficient because we'll be having deadlines and action plans. And so there's not a real big reason, a big advantage to put it into the general plan, because these strategic plans will actually be more beneficial.
They
Is that what
will.
I'm hearing you saying?
That's exactly right.
Mhm.
But I'm saying the law does say, and the law makes it clear, every one of these legally you can put in the general plan if you choose.
Okay,
Just recognize the fact is, Steve,
but we
as
don't
he
need
says,
We
to.
it
have
has
to
to go through plan.
re-kick, yeah,
But we
we have
don't
to
need
kick
to.
it back through the process.
Okay,
My
great.
suggestion would be is if you wanted some of these in, adopt this.
Adopt this and then
And then
go back
addendum.
and because again, you're going to have to address water conservation by 2025. So we can just put in a,
Yeah,
Yeah.
there'll be modifications throughout. I mean, you get it all the time. And you know, as the mayor said, all public comment goes to the planning commission by state statutes, by our own. So there, they,
Just gonna get longer and longer.
yeah.
they sift,
Yeah.
they sift through everything, make you a recommendation. The great thing about the planning commission, because they're not an elected body, they're not getting the same phone calls, the same, not death threats, but you know, the threats of, you know, we'll vote you out. They can look at it as a holistic view of what's better for Roy rather than each individual person.
Go ahead, Sam. There's no political twist to the decisions because sometimes politics sway decisions, whether they're right or wrong. You know that.
Right.
The planning commission, what Steve was suggesting, is not political. They simply look at the code and they follow the code. And whatever you support, whatever you agree in the code, they have to follow the code. That's what they do.
That's good. Well,
Comments?
the airport one is the one that scares me. 'Cause
Scares me.
If they
Yeah.
add on to that and have bigger planes come, they're gonna be
Great thing
flying
is
over
if they
my
want to
house.
do a modification of the boundaries, this is the decision, even if it's 10 years from now, most people look at it like, we don't want to modify Roy's boundaries.
I just see little planes right now. I don't want great big planes flying over my house.
Their plan is 15 to 17 a day.
You want to come to my house? I got 737s flying through the backyard all the time.
And then the chances
Every once in a
are-
while.
I was gonna say, you've been on the football field or the baseball field, when one comes over, you think it's gonna drop out of the sky.
The football game and one goes right over.
Yep. Well, let me just finalize this because I need a council direction. You can certainly consider, as it said, you can approve the general plan as written, and we can come back to the conversation if you think there's a topic in here that ought to be put in the general plan in the future. That's your decision. I think that's a fair way to approach it. Don't make that decision today, just be aware of it. But if you support the idea that a 5-year strategic strategy plan should include these kinds of things,
It should.
because they are real, they're coming at us. I don't know about you, but if you've heard the carbon neutral vehicles, California by 2030 or 2035, you cannot buy a carbon producing vehicle in California. That's what their law says. They're saying is in 2030, I can't even buy a Honda generator. You cannot buy a Honda generator to power your house in California in 2030.
Okay, I'm gonna get on my soapbox for a minute, and I can be voted off the island. I had an epiphany the other night. I was sitting in the parking lot of the library in Park City. There are 6 charging stations. There was a really fancy car backed up to one. An individual walked out, unhooked the car, got in, drove off. And I thought, I walked over there and I looked, is there a credit card slot?
No.
Is there a dollar bill machine? Can you put money into it? And I thought, no. You know who's paying for that electricity? Every resident that lives in Park City. Well, why am I not afforded that same thing when I go to the gas station and fill up my car? I want free fuel in my car. I'm not even gonna get into the whole electric, non-electric thing, but it's just interesting that people driving electric vehicles can get free fuel where people that are not.
Let's remember, Park City's not normal.
Well, but I
Sure, that's
guess
in the minutes.
I get that, but as I drive
I like
around,
that comment.
as I drive around, I'm seeing that more and more in communities, that they're putting up these charging stations where people are getting free
We
electricity.
have them in our library.
But it's
Yeah.
the same
There's
thing.
charging
We have to
stations.
talk about free.
Now, would you at least allow Matt and I to present to you, okay, a 5-year strategic strategy plan that identifies these, what I think are critical components, and Matt may have a couple others. It'll be a draft. It doesn't have to go through the planning commission. It can be, you can look at it, review it, the staff can look at it and bring something to you to look at to see if in fact there's something we can do with that. You
All
okay
right,
with that
you
idea?
talked us into it, you smooth talker, you.
Okay,
Let's do it.
that's all I got, Steve.
The last one is just the last page. And the typo will be done. Diane, you're the one that wants to
Omit.
Oh,
The word robust.
yeah, it wasn't very robust, but that's okay.
I can say it's from
But-
20 years of experience.
Yeah, it was as robust as it gets.
It's as robust as it gets.
There you have it.
Steve, is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Not tonight.
I just wanted to mention, Mayor, I appreciate you bringing up these topics because I think that having a defined list like that is very helpful for us, so we can look and start researching and keep it so we don't let them drop off the radar. So thank you very much for bringing that up, that list.
So will this be ready to vote on our council
Oh,
meeting?
no.
No? Oh, okay.
He's got-
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
It'll take him probably at least maybe 4 weeks.
It'll be done Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesday.
Okay.
I'll be here all night.
Okay.
Well, I don't know.
Steve, thank you. I think we made some great progress tonight. Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Anything else, the council you'd like to bring up? Okay, hearing nothing, then do I have a motion then to adjourn?
So moved.
I got one from Joe. Do I have a second?
I.
I heard that was from Randy. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We're adjourned. Great work.
Well done,
Thank you.
everybody.
It was a
Stop
very nice
recording.
work session.
Stop now.
Thank you, everyone.
Keep going.